Hello. Recently, as I've gotten back into DIY garage type work and kind of morphing into woodworking, I've picked up quite a few new tools or things that will help me in the garage that I didn't have before, some of which I didn't even know existed before. And I'm learning all I can, and I'm probably making a mistake on some of these tools. But what I had originally planned was to do an unboxing video of every single one, and then maybe a review or a further, a video showing me using them. But instead, as I've gone on, I just had these video files of me unboxing just sitting here. So I just wanted to run through a few of the things that I've added to my garage, and then I'll tell you my thoughts about them. The first thing is this set of Irwin Marples chisels, which you should see here in the video. The worst part about these is getting them out of this package. This protective plastic shell was extremely tough, even with my very sharp pocket knife, but I did eventually start manually brute forcing the chisels out of the package. This came with a set of 4 chisels, 1/4 inch being the smallest and 1 inch being the largest. The other ones were, I want to say, a 1/2 inch and a 3/4 inch. They came fairly sharp from the factory, and they didn't seem to be too difficult for me later to sharpen on a sharpening stone. And I've also used them already in the shop. I don't have a video of that handy, but they both, all 4 of them seem to do the job at removing material, doing very fine cuts. But I've never really used chisels before. I just had one cheap chisel before this, and I had only used it a handful of times to maybe rake off a corner or tap a scratchy part of the wood off or something like that. I didn't really know how to use them. I didn't know anything about joinery or anything like that. But once I started learning those things, I decided to pick up this set of chisels and actually make a go of it. These have really thick, heavy handles with a metal strike cap on the heel, on the bottom of them, and then a clear, I think it said acetate on the package in the middle of the handle. So unlike a lot of chisels, which you can store upside down with the blade pointing down, like the handle resting on a hole, they will topple over because the handles are so heavy and big. So the chisel holder that I made for them, which will be in a separate video, the handles are resting on the bottom with the blades pointing up. Okay, the second thing that I got were these Kreg project blocks. I had honestly never heard of or seen anything like this before. I guess the closest that I had come to getting something like this were the little triangle plastic things that you get in the painting aisle, where you can set a board or a project on while you paint them. This is for, I guess, for that as well, but also for sanding or some other type of a small project assembly. I got these on the advice of several, I guess, famous woodworking YouTubers or DIY YouTubers. They didn't cost that much. I want to say they were about $12 for the set of 4. Each one of them can twist to put out a little point, a rubberized point, which is kind of a hard point, but it's not abrasive or rough. I don't think it would scratch or leave a dent in your project unless your project is a really soft wood or the paint is still wet. Then it probably will leave a mark. But they do feel solid. I banged on them and tapped them with my knife, and they don't feel like they're just going to crack. I have used these since making this opening video to hold several different projects as I painted, as I sanded different things, and they seem to hold it up off of whatever surface you're on, especially if you have to, as I've done a few times when it was cold, had to bring a project inside the house to do some finishing, put on polyurethane, things like that. I wanted that project up off the carpet, so I used these project blocks for that, just for example. The next thing that I have here is the Black & Decker random orbital sander. I have never owned any kind of powered sander before. It always just sanded by hand, but I saw this on sale when I was in one of the big box stores recently, and of course I had seen many of the DIY building type people on YouTube using palm sanders, kind of like this, where you press with your palm to activate it, and because the price was low enough, it was attractive, so I decided to go for it. So far, I've been pretty happy with it. It works about as expected. The bottom plate holds a kind of a hook and loop style fastener, holds a sanding pad, sanding disc there, and it just orbits and vibrates very quickly, and it removes material from whatever piece of wood that you have, which is basically all you're asking for. It did come with one piece of, I think, I don't remember what grit that it came with, but I bought another package and they just stick on pretty easily. The cord is also a little bit longer than I expected for something so small. That's handy. I really dislike when One of these products comes with a 2-foot or a 3-foot cord, so you have to drag the heavier extension cord around. This cord is at least 6 feet long. It also has a small attached bag for dust collection, and it actually works. Now, the thing still puts off dust when you sand, but the bag does collect quite a bit of dust, and it comes on and off fairly easily, and I suppose could attach to a larger dust collection hose. The next thing that I have on this list is a sanding block. I'd also been looking for one of these for quite some time. I have just sanded with holding the sandpaper in my hand, which can get pretty uncomfortable at times. Also, the paper starts to tear on the edges. But this block has these nice plastic clips at the end, so you can just take one sheet of sandpaper, fold it over the ends, and clip it down, and then hold this ergonomic handle, which rotates, by the way, and sand your project. And it has a fairly flat surface, or extremely flat surface, so the sandpaper is always held in a flat orientation. It also works rounding off of corners. I've used this one quite a bit since opening it in this video. It was also really inexpensive. And the next thing I got was a center punch, an automatic center punch, because here I'm showing that in the past I've always used these, just a nail set, I guess is what you call them, where you just put this against a piece of wood and tap it with a hammer in order to get a place to start drilling your hole or to put a nail in. And that requires, not only does it require an extra tool, the hammer, but it requires an extra hand. One to hold the nail set and one to hold the hammer. So when I heard about an automatic center punch, I saw, again, several on YouTube. I thought this was a brilliant idea. And so I picked up one at a big box store. This is, I believe, one of the store brands. After I opened it, I had never tried one before, so I'm trying it here on this block of wood for the first time. It's supposed to have a spring in it, but here on my first use, I couldn't quite get it to work. But I did open it up. I found that there is a spring in it. I expected it to pop when I pressed down on the wood, but it wasn't. I think it's because I had it set too tensely, but just pressing on it left a decent enough dent in the wood for me to actually use. So when I later discovered that it actually will pop and leave an impression in the wood, I was pretty happy with it. Now later, I did replace this with one from the Jonathan Katz Moses store with the big red bulb on it that's much handier. But this alone is pretty handy compared to the center punch that I had before, which again required a hammer. Another thing that I picked up was this hole guide. I think the idea of these is that if you have some drill bits or screws or nails laying around that you don't know exactly what size they are, that you could just have this handy guide here and put the screw or drill bit through the hole to measure it. I'll just be honest, I haven't used this once since buying it. Not only is it a cheap, flimsy plastic that I'm afraid it'll just tear. It's so thin that I'm afraid it'll just rip if I put a drill bit through the slightly wrong-sized hole and then pull it back out, or a screw for that matter. I was originally looking for one made of metal because I had seen something like that on YouTube. However, none of the stores that I go to, none of the big box stores or even the smaller hardware stores and lumberyards in my area had one of these that was metal. Also, I'm fairly organized when it comes to my screws and drill bits. When I buy them, I keep them either in the original packaging until they're gone, or I separate them very carefully and organize them by size. So it's possible I'll never need one of these. So maybe it's a good thing that I just bought this $2 or $3 plastic sheet rather than a much more expensive metal one that I would never use. And now that I haven't used it for so long, I probably will not buy the metal one. One more thing I picked up recently were some parallel clamps. These are the first ever parallel clamps that I have owned. And I was hesitant at first to buy this cheaper brand from Harbor Freight, but I did on the recommendation of a YouTuber. And they're a lot heavier and more sturdy than I had originally expected. They have these nice plastic things on them to hold your work as you're clamping up. And at first I didn't know how to use it, and I was about to take these back to the store. I didn't realize that the handle, you just had to pop it out just a little bit because it's different. It doesn't have the quick release like my old F-style clamps. But I eventually realized you can just pull it out away from the bar and then it slides. I wish I had known that before. It would have saved me a little bit of nerves. The faces do look relatively parallel. I guess those are called the jaws. And I think they lean in toward each other just slightly. But then once you start applying pressure on something, that they become parallel. These I actually did use not long after buying them when I was building a blanket box. The plastic seems very solid, except for the back plates, which I think probably aren't that important. But the side plastic seems very solid. The handle is easy to use. And again, the bars are very heavy and sturdy. And I enjoyed these first two so much that I, within a few weeks, went and bought a couple more. One other thing that I purchased recently to expand my garage or shop kit were these 1, 2, 3 blocks, which again, recommended to me by many YouTube videos. Now, fortunately, these were not that expensive. I have yet to use them for anything, but they didn't cost me that much, and I'm sure that they will come in handy at some point. These are exactly 1 inch tall, 2 inches wide, and 3 inches long. I did measure just to be sure. The corners were not as sharp as I had been led to expect. They do seem to have been very slightly ground off on the corners so as not to cut anyone. Each block has quite a few holes through it. 5 of the holes have threads in them. I believe that's a 3/8 inch 16 thread. I understand that there can be many uses for these in addition to measuring, but I haven't found an exact use for them yet because I always have a pocket rule or combination square on me when I'm in the shop, so I don't need them for measuring. But I might at some point use them to set the blade depth of a saw or something like that. They do feel nice and sturdy, and they look nice. They might end up being paperweights, but again, I have just now recently gotten back into the shop, so time will tell if I end up using these for anything. And one more thing that I bought, which came in this torn up package, which I was really disappointed in. When I went to open the package, this powder or something, insulation, popped out of this package all over my dining room table. So I took it outside to open the rest of the way. And then I saw the pull to easy open strip, which I should have done in the first place. But this is a flush cut saw, which I ordered from the Katz Moses store. It has one side for softwood, one side for hardwood. It is a very, very light tool, very small and light. And the blade is very, very thin, but it does an amazing job. I've already used this dozens of times to flush cut dowels and to take a very thin layer off the end of a piece of stock. It says to oil it regularly and wipe with a cloth, but because of how narrow the blade is, when I try to wipe it, the cloth just immediately catches on the teeth and pulls threads out. So I haven't really been able to give it a good wiping since I've used it, but it looks nice here straight out of the box. But anyway, if you do not have a flush cut saw or a trim saw, a very, very thin, flexible saw like this, consider getting this one. This was inexpensive, came very quickly within a few days from the Katz Moses Tools store online, and I've been really happy with it so far. I wish only one thing, that it had a hole in the end of the handle to hang it on a nail or to put a lanyard through it so I could hang it from something, because storing it's been a little difficult to find an easy place to store it. Other than that, really happy with it. Hopefully get a bunch more videos up soon. I have quite a bit of footage from my last couple of months in the shop, and I haven't just put it together yet. But anyway, here's a bunch of tools I've gotten recently and what I think about them. Thank you for watching.